Good morning, everybody. All right, it's not raining, it's not snowing. Everyone, welcome everyone to our first Phoenix Rising event. It is so great to see people in the audience, right? I'll tell you a little bit more about this journey, but it's one of those where we're really going to have a talk about failure in the Midwest, in Minnesota. And we're going to get people to actually come and listen to us. So I'm really excited for the day. My colleagues have done an amazing job. Wanted to just first start off with our primary sponsor for this event is IdeaGist. Thank you so much for helping to make this day happen. We tried to keep the cost of these tickets reasonable so that we could get as many people to attend as possible. And so by deferring some of those costs, it definitely helps. Also, Rajiv Tandon of the Beer Network and Wendy Kaufman, thank you again so much for your help and support. We had a lot of people, it takes a village to raise an event, so we're very thankful for everyone's support. My name is Matt Hunt. I'm one of the co-curators for the event, and I'll be kicking us off today with some introductions, a little bit of the logistics, and then talk a little bit about the reality of failure. And what I've seen from my career. We got into the welcomes. Thank yous, Rajiv and Wendy. Again, I couldn't say thank you enough for your help in launching this initiative. When I talk about innovation and failure, I always try to level set on a definition piece. A friend just the other day was mentioning how she was being coached about her initiative, and, well, that's not a failure, right? You succeeded in so many ways. It's not a failure. I try to make sure we just level set quickly on the difference between mistakes and failures. By definition, a mistake is an incorrect, unwise, or unfortunate decision caused by bad judgment, a lack of information, or a lack of attention. A failure is simply a lack of success. In the dictionary, it doesn't bring all the stigma, the shame, and the blame along with it. It's simply a lack of success. When something that you were trying to accomplish fell short of what was required or what was expected. The key difference here is mistakes don't always have to end in failure. We make mistakes every day. But failures aren't always caused by mistakes. Right? Many initiatives were launched. I see some smiling faces with that comment. Many initiatives were launched with the best intention, with the best ideas, with the best information at hand. And you get to the end of the road, and the world isn't as you expected it. Right? So again, just a brief note on those differences. So what was the spark for me? Why this topic of failure? I spent 10 years at Best Buy driving innovation work, new concepts, new store concepts, new product categories. And it was around 2006, several years into my role, that I noticed we kept sweeping initiatives under the rug, right? That failed new initiative would launch, everyone would be excited, we're going to the moon. And then reality would set in. And it wasn't working out as planned, it was about to fail. And we would sweep these initiatives under the rug. By trade, I'm a programmer, right? I would crank out code. Never once in my life did I build a perfect program the first time. As a programmer, you write code, you debug the code, and then you fix the code. Yet in somehow this idea of driving innovation in a large corporate environment, we were expected to launch the perfect program the first time, right? We tried to fix some things, but the expectations were this is going to succeed. And we didn't know otherwise. So we were shutting down a concept store that I worked on for several years called Escape. And the reality was we did several things that impacted that project, that caused that project to fail. One of them was we had gone with an off-the-shelf POS system. And for those not in retail, POS is the cash registers. At the time when that store was launching, the estimate for a 3,500 square foot store, much smaller than this room, was $1 million for POS. Any of you entrepreneurs in the room or corporate finance folks, you'll quickly realize you're never going to pay back that capital investment on $1 million POS system. But that's what it was, because Best Buy only had 3 size boxes: 30,000 square foot, 45,000 square foot, 60,000 square foot. $1 million is nothing when you're generating revenue out of those size stores. It was everything for us. Our decision to go off the shelf prohibited us from automatically pulling inventory from our distribution centers. It prohibited us from pushing inventory back that was going end of life. It impacted our ability. We couldn't do automatic price markdowns. And if any of you know the retail consumer electronics business, price matches, price markdowns are everything. And then finally, on the warranty side, our warranty programs were tied back to the transaction number on our Best Buy POS. So if we didn't have that transaction number, we couldn't sell warranty. We had to reinvent the wheel. 2006, we're about to launch new store concepts called Best Buy Mobile. I'm in a room of about 20 to 30 executives, managers, all folks who are bright minds in the retail space. And we're about to make a decision. What POS system do we want to go with? Now, in the 3 years that had spanned, Best Buy's POS had gone from $1 million per store to $167,000 per store. They took the time to right-size the infrastructure. That's great, but for stores now that maybe range from 400, 1,200, maximum 2,000 square feet, $167,000 is still a lot of capital to be invested. We are about to make the same mistake. We are about to make the same error of judgment and go off the shelf. And I realized at that moment, if we weren't in the room, we would have. Conventional wisdom said, save the money. Go off the shelf. At that point, I knew we needed to do something more. We needed to talk about these failures. We needed to share what we were learning so that the organization could take the money that they had invested, the millions of dollars that they had invested in these previous ideas, these previous concepts, and learn from them. And that was the spark. So as we're having numbers of failures with our initiatives at Best Buy, I thought, is it just us? Is this just our organization? And the reality was, as I talked to more people in for-profit organizations, some of those in town that are world-class innovators, they said, we have the exact same problem. We launch these new initiatives. They might be high risk. If they look like they're going to fail, the executives go running for the hills, and the individuals are wondering what they had just done to their careers. Right? Does that sound familiar in your organization? No, but it's normal. The executives never get promoted based on a long list of failures. They might get promoted in spite of those failures, but never because of them. Right? It's human nature to want to obscure that fact. So in my talks, in my research, there are some data points out there. No one wants to talk about their failures, but there are some folks out there who are starting to approach the subject from a data perspective. One of them is Fahrenheit 212. They're a consultancy out of New York. They did a survey of 100 chief innovation officers. They asked those chief innovation officers, what percentage of your innovation initiatives come to market? 66% of those chief innovation officers said less than 25% of those ideas come to market. 75% of them fail. Right? A handful succeed. 10% of those chief innovation officers said they didn't know. Truthfully, I want that job. I want to be the chief innovation officer who doesn't know the success rates. No. Similarly, Accenture did a study talking about the challenges of low-cost innovation and how it's so costly. How it's costing more than the executives want. The reality is many organizations are de-risking their innovation work. They're going with safer, lower risk stuff. Coming out of a recession, it's a natural occurrence. But like your personal investment portfolio, I guarantee none of you have, unless you're like 6 months from retirement, none of you have just fixed income, right? You've got equities, you might have some junk bonds, you might have some real estate, you've got a portfolio. Similarly, companies need a portfolio. Not all of it needs to be risky, but there need to be some of those big bets. Thomas Thurston, who's a data scientist out of Oregon. Thomas wrote an article. He's got a data set of over 1,000 corporate ventures. He's worked with Clay Christensen, Intel Capital Management, lots of big companies. In that data set of over 1,000 corporate ventures, 78% of them fail. 78%. They no longer exist 7 to 10 years later. Now maybe they got acquired, maybe they got merged, maybe they got spun off, but they don't exist in their current form, right? That's the reality. That's what we're dealing with. And if I had known that 15 years ago as I entered this career, I would have done things different, right? I would have presented the plans different. I would have talked about this idea of what if things don't go right, right? I would have forced the learning structures behind it. Similarly, on the entrepreneurial side, most of you have probably seen this information. Shakir Ghosh out of Harvard, 2,000 venture-backed startups. He looked at 75% of them fail to return a single dime to their investors. Now, maybe it's, Rajiv points out, maybe it's because it's venture and they force a certain constraints and certain requirements, but 75% of those initiatives fail. 20% fail to hit their objectives. 5% make it, right? And that 5% in that portfolio pay for everything else. If we had known that, so we know that in the entrepreneur and venture space, can we bring that to other disciplines? Can we bring that to corporate innovation? Can we bring that to nonprofits? Can we bring that to government programs or education? Right? So, risky initiatives, and I usually use the term disruptive innovation. Those are the big bets. We have a local company that has made their fortune on small bets. General Mills launched Cheerios in 1941. They have over a dozen successful derivations of Cheerios. In an audience this size, I could give you a spoonful, you could tell me whether you like it, and we have a pretty good confidence level of whether that product's going to succeed or not. Right? But in that safe world, General Mills still has failure. Right? Team Cheerios no longer exists. Millennials, I'm not sure whether it was ever meant to span, doesn't exist. Berry Burst Cheerios doesn't exist, right? Nothing is perfect, but it's a $33 billion organization built on incremental innovation. So, if failure is going to be a natural outcome of this activity, what can we do? How do we lead our teams through failure? The reality is, your success is derived based on your teams, and their fear of failure is going to impact your success. Right? The AMA research did a study. 61% of employees are afraid to take on more responsibility. They're afraid to fail. Right? The constructs within the organization don't exist to support taking that risk. So we've got this fear of failure. What do we do about it, right? Or what is it? What causes it? Economic failure, loss of friends and family. We spend more time at work than we do with our families, right? When you lose that job, you're likely not going to spend as much time with those friends. Or the loss of self-esteem and confidence. Those map identically back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Psychology 101, our need for safety, right? Our financial resources, our need for belonging, and our need for self-esteem. We all have common responses to fear. We retreat to our comfort zone. We exhibit defensive behaviors. We avoid conflict. We come out attacking, right? It's not my fault, it's their fault. Or worse yet, we start playing not to lose, right? The risk is too great. The reward is not too high. We play not to lose. These are all normal reactions. Albert Bandura came out with a concept called social learning theory. And in his work, he talks about how we learn from each other. The reality is that does not end when we're children. Right? My 8-year-old and 10-year-old continually learn from one another. But if you or I are in an organization and you see me take a big header, you see me fall hard from a failure, you're going to change your behavior knowingly or unknowingly. Do that several times over. Show what happens, show a stern response to a failed initiative. Soon you'll be left with an organization where people aren't willing to step up and take those risks. I'm going to breeze through a couple of just different regional concepts on failure. Colombia, South America, I have a friend who's launching a new product category, a new product. Failure is seen as a permanent stain on your reputation, right? There's no way you should fail if you have the right connections and the right ideas. It's not an option. But yet they have two different pitch decks. To their local investors, they only show the failure-free pitch deck. To their international investors, to their US investors, they show their failure included. We've got gray hair, we've stumbled along the way, we know better. So in that culture, failure is not tolerated. But you walk down the street and you'll see store after store closed. Failure happens, right? They just don't talk about it. Compare that to Gujarat, India, where entrepreneurship was by necessity. As I understand it, the economic and agricultural challenges forced them to become sea merchants. They found a model that worked and they repeated it over and over again. The interesting thing about this culture is that when two entrepreneurs from Gujarat meet each other, the story is they don't talk about their successes. They don't boast about all the things they've accomplished. They talk about their failures. I failed at this initiative. I failed at this. I had storefronts in Asia. I had flower shops in Europe, right? They start with a conversation around their failures. How different is that than what we see in the United States? And then finally, Silicon Valley, right? Randy Komisar talks about the idea of getting to Plan B. He wrote a book, Getting to Plan B. Why Plan B? Because Plan A didn't work. He suggests that what distinguishes Silicon Valley is not its successes, but the way in which it deals with failure. It's a numbers game. It's a portfolio. And there's no shame and no blame. Jeff Bezos, just last December, shared one of his biggest failures, the Fire Phone. He talks about it being $1 billion failure. But he's not afraid to continue to place big bets because those are what get him the big returns. Those bets are Amazon Web Services, Amazon Kindle, right? All of the products we use today and that have been the amazing growth engines for the organization. He's still willing to place bets. 90% of his investment, though, is in incremental innovation, making the shop better, building better supply chain logistics. 10% is on the big stuff. There are some great examples. I'm going to skip through these for right now for time's sake, but these are organizations. Some great quotes. In the break, we can talk about a few of them. Sir Richard Branson, Howard Schultz, Ed Catmull, and Mark Zuckerberg, right? Mark's point to his Facebook employees, move fast and break things. Move fast and break things. If you punish failure in that scenario, you are killing your motto, right? No one's going to move fast and break things. We must be the change we wish to see in this world, right, as leaders. But what the result can be is people and organizations that can learn from failure and that can be resilient, that understand the risk, reinforce the culture of risk-taking, build the processes and tools to learn from those failures, and then to ensure that those lessons are used and not shoved under the rug. I shared the story about the failed concept store. My first failure came here on the University of Minnesota campus. My freshman fall quarter, I had a 1.2 GPA. Calc and physics were not my friend at the time. I was resilient. Picked myself up, dusted myself off, got myself into the undergrad program here at the Carlson School, got myself into B School. Had a great journey along the way. But I learned at that point, failure does not define you. It's something that happens, right? All right. This is our first event. We're going to expect imperfection. We're going to expect that your first speaker runs a little bit over. I really want you to enjoy the day, and I'm so glad you could make it, and I hope to get a chance to meet each and every one of you. Thank you.